Hopefully my battery doesn't die. Well, let's talk about everything I read in January. I'm very late to the game, so let's catch up. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. I am very late to the January wrap up game, so I'm just going to launch myself right into it. I just got home from work. Um, and nothing was set up. So I'm still like setting things up and talking to you at the same time. I have dog hair all over me. I'm a hot mess. But we're going to do this like we always do. We're going to talk about my Storygraph stats, and then we're going to hop into my bookly and we're going to look at everything that I read in the month of January. So without further ado, let's do it. The stats. Okay, I need you to remember that in January we were still doing the crazy, epic, insane reading challenge amongst my friends. So I read 24 books, which was 8,130 pages. It took me an average of 4 days to finish a book. And my moods were emotional, dark, mysterious, reflective, and sad. And then it kind of trickles down from there. The pace was mostly medium and slow, which is funny if you think about the fact that I was doing this crazy reading challenge. Um, yeah, that's funny. And then my page count was basically sub 500. That's it. No real big chunky books in January. I read, I think, like one nonfiction. So it's 92% fiction, 9% nonfiction in January, starting the year off slow with the nonfiction, but there will be more. There always is. My top five genres are literary, historical, classic, queer, and contemporary. Big drop off there to contemporary. A lot of lit fic, and I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed with it. Uh, so I'm shaking some things up at the end of February here, but yeah, that's where we are. And then my average star rating was 3.9, which is higher than I thought it would be, honestly. I must have had a few really great books in there that I forgot about. There were some that I really didn't like, but that's not a bad start to the year. So let's actually see what all of these books were. Over to the bookly. Everything I read in January. Let's go through this rapid fire. We'll get caught up and I'll stop being behind on my like standard videos for the channel. So I did a reread of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue after reading the books that I read for this reading challenge. Bookly puts things, I think, in the order that I finished them, or the order maybe I put them in. I don't know. So it's a weird order. No, this is not the order in which I read anything, but we're gonna go with it. I love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I still love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think it's one of V.E. Schwab's best books. If you've never read it, it's about a girl that basically makes a deal with the devil, or like a devil, a demon, to get out of a marriage that she doesn't want to be in. And I think it's like the 1600s in France where she makes this deal. And what ends up happening, the bargain she strikes, she can live forever basically, but she will be instantly forgotten. Like if somebody turns their back on her, leaves the room, comes back, she's constantly like Groundhog Daying with everybody she's ever met. And we flash between like her past as she's getting to the present and the experiences she has moving through time. And then in her current timeline, when she finally meets somebody who remembers her. And it is such a, I think it's a fantastic book. It's such a comfort read. I love it. I'm so glad I reread it. It's so good. Moving on. Snow by Orhan Pamuk was the Patreon pick for, or like my book club pick for January and February. We need to pick one for February. So if you are a paid subscriber anywhere, you can let me know if there's a book that you've been wanting to read for March and April, and we might pick it. And if you want to be a paid subscriber, memberships are open. If you prefer Patreon, that's there. And if you happen to be over on Substack, that is also an option. I appreciate everybody who actually contributes monetarily to the channel. You don't have to do it. Liking, subscribing, watching, that is all enough. But Some people do like to go above and beyond, and I truly appreciate you. So here we go. Snow by Orhan Pamuk. I have a review coming for this that I will release first to paid people and then trickle out from there. This is about Turkey and the tensions within Turkey, particularly the religious tensions and the class tensions in a lot of ways, particularly like at the turn of the 21st century. Uh, you're in this town of Kars, which is tiny and is a microcosm of Turkey itself. And our characters get snowed in there, and we watch, I think it's over 3 days, the tensions rise between these people. Where our main character is this poet who was sort of ostracized out to Germany and then has returned to Turkey, is following, is sort of reporting on this event that has been occurring among some of the women in this town where they've been committing suicide, and they're called the Headscarf Girls or the Headscarf, something like that. It's been a little bit since I've looked at the review, but anyway, it's very interesting. The writing is not bad, but it's not like a book where you get swept up into it. It's definitely really interesting things that are being talked about, especially if you don't know anything about the political landscape, the religious landscape in Turkey. It's very insightful. Um, I found the use of snow very interesting. It kept making me think back to There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak, which I just think is interesting. You have two Turkish authors who are using this um, sort of water image to give us like a bigger picture concept. But anyway, definitely enjoyable, but not like super compelling. Like you're not gonna like compulsively read it. But I did want to go back and figure out this little mystery, and then something happens to our narrator, and then trying to figure out what happened to our narrator. Like I'm kind of middle of the road on this one, but I'm very curious to read what else Orhan Pamuk has written, and I have a couple on the shelves, so I will probably maybe sprinkle in one or two this year. Moving on. The Blind Owl by Sadi Hadiat. I definitely said his name wrong. This is an Iranian author. I think this came out, I want to say in the 30s. It could be even older than that. And it is a trip, man. I recommend this specific edition, the Penguin edition. It has a great forward in it. You can read about half the forward, and then I would stop, read the book, and come back and read the rest of the forward, and then maybe read the book again. It's only like a handful of pages, um, like 100, it's like 112 pages. So you're basically following this man and his fever dream. He is, I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird, quirky, dark roller coaster of a book. Like I couldn't put it down. I needed to know what was reality and what was maybe like a drug induced haze. It's I enjoyed this. I really do. And I think I need to revisit it. And I think I need a physical copy for my shelves so I can keep going back to it. We're going to hit a few of the books from the tail end of that reading challenge I was doing. So, Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lenin. I fully admitted in my Substack that over on Substack that I don't know if I really paid that much attention to this book or enough attention to this book because of this frantic reading pace we were doing for this reading challenge. I do not recommend reading like that. Don't do what I did, kids. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. So I may need to revisit this, but I kind of want to read more like classics like Euripides, that kind of stuff, because that's what we're talking about here. And I don't know enough about like the ancient Greeks. So I think there's pieces of this that went over my head. And that might be why even at like speed, I couldn't really connect with this because I didn't have any foundation, but it is interesting. I like the sort of look at being othered, the way they've othered the Athenians in this town and what they've done to them and what happens when you become an outsider. And then what happens when you start to develop empathy for the outsider. Uh, and there's a lot more in this, and it's kind of funny at times. I did enjoy it, but I feel strange giving like an actual like solid review on it because I don't think that I did it justice or I gave it the time it deserved. But I might revisit this one. Thirst by Marina Yazuchuk. I Mm. I believe she's Argentine, and this is like a vampire story. We have two different narrators. You have like your vampire, more past storyline, and then you have your more current storyline. And there's this woman who's dealing with a sick mother. Grieving. She's like pre-grieving her sick mother. She's got caregiver fatigue, and she unearths this vampire, and that starts a whole story, a whole thing, a whole relationship. And I kind of dug it. Like it's a strange little book, but I'm kind of into it, and I want to revisit this for other reasons. Yeah, I really liked thinking back to like it's set a lot in the cemetery in Recoleta in Buenos Aires, and I really that itself is like a really interesting setting for any sort of vaguely horror-ish book. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. When Mackenzie comes to town by a couple different dudes, um, this I hesitate to say I enjoyed because it infuriated me to no end. But if you don't know what McKinsey is, they are this enormous consulting firm that kind of puppet masters in a lot of ways, a lot of things in our lives, and it will infuriate you to see how like insidious it is and how this one consulting firm has their fingers in so many pies, including foreign governments and all kinds of things. It's really upsetting and um yeah, I think it's worth a read. I do think that I had Jess Owens read this as well, and she made a really valid point that she wished that this would have been in like chronological order, and I agree with her. Um, that I think that this would have made the overall, like, story arc a little easier to follow because you kinda jump around a bit. I think they group it more by, like, topic, um, based on, like, where Mackenzie is, like, industry-wise and what they're doing, so you'll be, like, talking about sort of early history and then, like, finance and then maybe, like, government, and so it's a little it could have been organized, I think, in a better way, but I see why they organized it the way they did. I just don't know if I would prefer it. I think I would have preferred something else. And I did read this for the reading challenge. I read The Mystery of Mrs. Christie by Marie Benedict. I think this is just like a nice little historical fiction about when Agatha Christie went missing. You're going between two timelines. You have the timeline in which Agatha Christie has just gone missing, and you're following her husband and the things that are going on, and then eventually you follow her. And then you have the like more past timeline where you see Agatha Christie and her husband, how they meet, how they fall in love, how their marriage spoils and doesn't go well, or sorry, sours maybe is a better word than spoils. I mean, Agatha Christie is the original Gun Girl, so I did enjoy the story, and I like the speculations that I guess that are made on perhaps why Agatha Christie did this. But at the end of the day, it's not like it wasn't like a blow you away kind of book. It was just nice. It was just a good book. I think if you're just looking for something pleasant, this is a great pleasant read, especially if you have any fondness for Agatha Christie. I did read Bram Stoker's Dracula and was shocked to find out how much I really loved this because my vague recollection of reading this when I was much, 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 much younger is that it was kind of boring. And I don't know why I thought it was boring because it's fun and it's funny. I think Van Helsing is really funny. The amount of times he's like shocked that Mina is smart or anything as a woman, like every time she does anything remotely um, intelligent or like clever or anything like that, he's always like, "Oh, I can't believe she did that. She's a woman." And like I kind of enjoyed the how farcical he is as a character. I think it's action packed. I truly enjoyed this. I don't know why I was always so I don't know where I got this memory that it was boring, but we've rewritten that, wrote over that file in my hard drive. I really enjoyed Dracula. I do have a review coming for this as well. The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera is has always been one of my favorite books. I read it for the first time in college because a boy I liked said it was his favorite book, and so I read it. And I actually truly enjoyed it, and it still holds water today. It's set during the Prague Spring and in the 60s, and we follow four different characters, and we're basically looking at these ideas of it's very philosophical. So you're looking at like lightness and heaviness and life and the meaning of life and how there isn't really any and how that does or doesn't affect the choices that we make. And it's all told through this lens of the Prague Spring and these four people. And I really enjoy this book. It is quotable. It is, and you will annotate the hell out of it if you are somebody who annotates. I think it's brilliantly written. It is if I ever do manage to put together a list of books that are like the books that made me as a reader, this is very much on that list. This is like one of those pivotal books in my life as a reader. So I do have a review. I have to edit it. It's filmed. I just have to edit it. So keep your eyes peeled. There will be one coming shortly. I will do my best to do this book justice. I don't know if I'm good enough at this reviewing thing for a book like this, but I will throw my hat in the ring, which seems like a pun, but anyway. Carmela by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. This was good. This is pre-Dracula. It is Carmilla is this white lady vampire. She's very charming and ends up pursuing this young woman in this household. She gets sick. They end up finding out that Carmilla is a vampire. I I think I mean it's a cult classic for a reason. It's not like the best vampire tale, but I enjoy it as like the basis of like lesbian vampire canon. It's an important piece of vampire canon, so you must read it. I read my first Bob Woodward, and it might be my last Bob Woodward, but I was very curious about this one that just came out. More, it's about like Trump and Biden and Zelensky and Ukraine and Russia and everything that's been going on and like the insurrection and all of that. It's not that it was bad. I just felt like when we got to a very specific part, it had a lot more like pro-Israeli propaganda attached to it. And I just felt like it really overly simplifies what's going on in Palestine. And I didn't really enjoy that part, but I was sold for like kind of everything else before that. But it's definitely interesting. I think if you want to read anything to sort of start making sense of what's been happening in the last like decade or so, um, particularly in the US, but also on a global scale. I think it's a handy thing to read. It has points, but it was fine. Anyway, moving on. Julia Armfield, Private Rights. I did read this for the challenge as well. I'm not going to tell you every one of the ones that I read for the challenge because we'll be here for a while. I like the atmosphere of this, but I felt like it needed a little bit more world building. It was relying a little bit too much on leaving you to fill in certain gaps, and like that was the eeriness of it. Like the stuff you couldn't see is what made it eerie, but they left I feel like she left too much for the reader to fill in to the point where I kind of wanted her to hold my hand just a smidge more. Also, Our Wives Under the Sea was just so freaking brilliant that I feel like it's really hard for me to hold almost anything up against it, but I will continue to read Julia Armfeld. It was very there were a lot of really great moments. Also, I think I will revisit this when I'm not reading it at speed as well to see how my experience with it changes. Anyway, Alice Hoffman wrote When We Fly Away. When We Fly Away. This is a novel about the days before Anne Frank's diary. So this is about the Franks when they escape to the Netherlands. They're in Amsterdam, and the things that have happened or that happen that lead up to them being going into hiding. And then I can't remember if we also go right up until when they are, I think just goes into hiding. Yes, we go into hiding. We watch her get her journal, her diary, and all that. And it's just a really beautifully written young adult novel to explain what happened before this like seminal piece of nonfiction that most of us read in elementary school or middle school. And there's just so much hope and love um, in this family and in Anne Frank herself. And I think it's brilliant. It's wonderful. I really enjoyed this. Three Fires by Denise Mina. I did not like. This is about the Bonfire of the Vanities. It also weirdly made reference to like current contemporary things as well. I found it a hot mess. Did not like this. The Scarlet Pimpernel. This is just a nostalgic read, straight nostalgia for Alyssa. I've said it a couple times. The Scarlet Pimpernel is like a it is this obsession I had when I was a kid. I absolutely loved the movie. I loved any adaptation about it. I loved this story. I loved this idea. I loved the swashbuckling drama and the petticoats and the dripping diamonds of 1700s fashion, and I loved it all. I eat it all up. I don't think everyone will like this, but this is just a delight. I have an omnibus of other Scarlet Pimpernel stories. I've read one of the four. Well, I guess I've read two because this is the first one. I've read the first two in this omnibus of four. The second one was unremarkable, but still like pleasant to read, and I will continue to read through that omnibus just for my own sort of nostalgic pleasure. Yeah. Catherine by Anya Seaton. This is about Catherine and a guy whose name I'm forgetting, and I will put it on the screen. It's historical fiction. It was written in the 50s. They have this very scandalous relationship. He was married to somebody else. He's actually married to two other people. Then eventually he does marry her. A lot of the British royal family is descended from these people. John of Gaunt, I think that's right. And it took a while for that to come out of my brain. And I didn't really know anything about these two people in history, so it was a very dense historical fiction. It didn't move very quickly. I think it's just because it's from the 50s, but I did enjoy it. Like in general, I did enjoy it as a learning experience. I don't know if I would recommend it. I'm trying to think of how I wanted to phrase that. The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. I really surprisingly enjoyed this. I think I read this because the prompt was like something pre-1800s. I was like, fine, I'll read The Sorrows of Young Werther. And this is very philosophical and it's very interesting. You have this young man and he's obsessed with this woman. I think her name is Caroline. I could be wrong, but he's obsessed with this woman and she isn't as obsessed with him. And he marries somebody else who gives her a very comfy life. And he tries to cope with it. He can't. He ends up killing himself and he kills himself in a very horrific fashion. And this may or may not have sparked a whole thing of young men killing themselves at the time. So it's got a lot of just like lore to it, but it's also very interesting. And I did watch something about it where I guess around the time that this was written was only like a handful of years after suicide was made like not a crime in Germany or in wherever exactly Garza was from at that exact time. I never really good on all the different like city states and stuff and a lot of European countries over the years. But anyway, so to look at it through that lens of as a discussion of taking your own life and what it means to take your own life and whether you should or should not or the moral failings or not of doing that. Um, it's interesting. I think there's actually a lot of value in it, and it is really well, at least this translation I read was very well written. There's several different translations, so I don't know the best ones, but I did enjoy it. I would be interested in reading a few other translations to see how I feel about them as well. I, of course, finished my House of Mirth reread for my year with Edith Wharton, and I will be posting a separate review of this on the channel. So keep your eyes out for that. Follow along on Substack this year for all of my weekly, bi-weekly, whatever I'm doing, depending on the book, updates on the books we are reading. There is a welcome sort of video outlining what we will be reading this year. Love this. Poor Lily Bart, such a good book. Like, if you've never read Edith Wharton, I think this is a fantastic place to start. If you're going to read Edith Wharton, I think this, Ethan Frome, and Age of Innocence will give you like those are her three biggest hitters. This is not anything earth shattering to say, but I think they do a very good job of capturing her writing as an author. But anyway, moving on. I'll talk about this more in another video, but I loved it. Little by Edward Carey. This is a historical fiction about Madame Tussaud and her childhood and how she became who she is. And I loved this. There's little cartoons throughout, like not cartoons, but like illustrations throughout. It is a sad story. It's a moving story. It's a grim story. I love this. Highly recommend. It moves so fast. It's awesome. The Hours by Michael Cunningham. I have a review coming for this as well that I have to edit. Love this. This is looking at three women and it's sort of mirrored off of Mrs. Dalloway. One of these three women is Virginia Woolf while she's writing Mrs. Dalloway. And we're looking at things like time and the mark we kind of leave on the world and being creative and memory and nostalgia and the pressures of living in suburbia, and it's just so brilliantly written. It's so good. Absolutely adore this book. Such a great book. The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. It's fine. It's a mystery set mostly in the cloisters in New York City, and it centers around like the occult, but specifically tarot. It's ultimately a forgettable book, but I think that again, if you just need a pleasant read to get you through a train ride or something, this is fine. This will do it. Eliza Clark, She's Always Hungry. This is her collection of short stories. They're kind of horrorish, they're kind of funny. I really enjoyed them. There were some really stellar ones in here. I love this collection. Now I just need to read Boy Parts, and I think I have read all of her books that are published right now. So she's rapidly becoming a sort of auto read author. I really like her whole tone and like these are so different from Penance, which is the only other Eliza Clark that I've read, but I just like I guess the breadth of her work so far that I've read. Anyway, really enjoyed this. I do recommend. Clean by Alia Turbuco Zeran. We did a review of this or discussion of this over on TBR Lowdown. I'll try to remember to link it down below so you can go watch it. Uh, this is like a literary crime thriller, I want to call it almost. Um, I absolutely adored this. It's Chilean. It's following this maid who's telling us the story. We know that the daughter of this family she's been working for has died, and we're trying to get to the moment in time where she does, so we can figure out did the maid kill her? Did Estella kill her? Did she not? What happened? What's going on? I could not put this down. This was like this, unlike Snow, was like a compulsive read. I had to know what was happening. I had to know how this story was going to unfold. Trigger warning for like a dead animal. So just remember, if you don't want a dead dog, just don't read it. But I really enjoyed this. So check out that discussion for more thoughts. But this was great. And then We Do Not Part by Hong Kong was so phenomenal. I feel like this book in particular takes the White Book, Human Acts, and The Vegetarian, and like puts them in a blender, and we get out. We do not part. It has like the creepy, eerie, almost fever dreamish elements of The Vegetarian. It has the historical horror elements of Human Acts, and it has the just beautiful lyrical writing of the White Book. I thought this was phenomenal. We're looking at the atrocities that happened in Korea during the Korean War, after the Korean War, what happened to people's families, to how it is sad. It is confusing at times and not like in a negative way. There are these like blurrings between like reality and memory that I think are really beautifully done. And it feels like the kind of book that you can go back to over and over again and pull out a little bit more from and really get to know it. And I loved this book. I hope to see it on some award lists this year. It would be interesting if this was on International Booker. I don't know if it's eligible, but it would be really interesting if it was on there. If it's not there, it will be on something because it was phenomenal. That is everything I read in the month of January. I can't remember if I held any books over into February. I mean, I probably did. So I'm still reading A Backwards Glance, which is Edith Wharton's autobiography and carried that into February. I might finish it in February. I'm going really slow. I really just read it when I have time just to kill somewhere, like on lunch break or something. I was just like, or at PT when I'm getting my heat in my stim. So I'm going really slowly through it. I'm still making my way through the Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, which I hope to read by the end of March. That's kind of my goal on that. So that's really it. So let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know some of your favorite reads from from January. Yeah, I think that's really it. I gotta wrap this up. I gotta go get to an appointment. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want.